Hi, I'm Peter, otherwise known as Flick, and today I'm going to be showing you how I made one of my pads from my remix of You and What Armies Into Your Eyes. So when this pad's finished, it's going to sound like this. Absolutely great sound for filling out chilled out music like the remix. Now, the notes that I used are just simple triad chords in B minor, which is the key the song's in. And it's important to note that I do have reasons set up so that when I create a device, the patch is already initialized. And the way I did that was going to edit preferences and unticking the box that says load default sounds in new devices. Also important to note, I'm using Reason 6.5, and I'm also using the Pulsar Dual LFO, which you can only get in Reason 6.5. If you have Reason 6, it's a free update, so definitely recommend getting it. If you can't get it, you'll also notice that the menus are slightly different, but you should be able to work around and come up with a similar sound. Now let's get started with the patch. Create a combinator, add in a mixer 6:2, and then a Thor. Alright, I'll copy the notes over into this new instrument now so that we can listen to it as we're making it. I'm copying by holding down Control and clicking and dragging. It's pretty useful to use that shortcut when you're, duplicating things. Anyways, now that notes are in there, we're going to solo this one so that we only hear that. And let's just take a listen to the notes in the default Thor patch. Okay, so pretty basic saw wave stuff. Let's open up the Thor, and we'll start out by making our first oscillator. This is going to be a 3 oscillator synth. The first one is an FM pair. Now we're going to set the carrier to 4 and the mod to 5. Now since these numbers aren't evenly divisible, the FM pair oscillator is going to create some really interesting harmonics. They're going to be high pitched. We're going to raise the octave to 5. And they're going to create the high end of the sound. Now last thing for this oscillator is we're going to just raise the FM amount to around 30. Just a tiny bit. Now this one is going to be the only oscillator we're running into filter 1. And then we're going to create the other 2 oscillators, which are a wavetable oscillator and a simple analog oscillator, and those are both going to go into filter 2. Make sure filter 2 is run through, and we'll get set with these 2 oscillators. Now the wavetable oscillator, I'm going to set to the PPG8 HP VCF wavetable and set the position to about halfway because we're going to be modulating that later. The octave we're going to bring down to 3, and this oscillator is going to bring up the bass end of the sound. The last oscillator, our analog oscillator, we're going to set to a triangle wave, leave the pulse width and the octave knobs where they are. Now onto our filters. Okay, filter 1 we're going to set to a high pass filter, so set to state variable, high pass. And for the frequency, we're going to bring it up just a tad to 2.5 kilohertz or so, holding shift for more accuracy, and bring the ENV to 0 so that it doesn't change over time with the filter envelope. For filter 2, we're going to set it to a low pass filter with the same frequency, so that 2.5 kilohertz, and ENV again to 0. The mixer, we're going to move towards oscillators 2 and 3 to get rid of a little bit of the really high-pitched sounds from the FM pair oscillator, so that they're just kind of hovering there in the background. And they're still pretty piercing, so we're going to set filter 3 to a low-pass filter, ENV to 0 again, and the frequency also to about 2.5 kilohertz. Now is a good time to bring up the amp envelope. Since it's a pad, we're going to have a slow attack. Set that to around a second, or maybe a little bit more. Holding shift if you want more accuracy again. We're going to set the sustain to full so it doesn't lose volume over time, and then the release up to about 300 milliseconds. We're also going to turn on the shaper and leave it on soft clip, and then bring the drive up to about 2/3. Let's listen to what that sounds like now. Already it's getting a little bit loud, so we're going to lower the volume to about negative 15 decibels. Now that we have our basic sound, we're going to start making it a little bit more interesting. We're going to use pulsars to modulate different aspects of the pad. Now, pulsar is one of the rack extensions that was introduced with Reason 6.5. For now, it's free, so if you have Reason 6.5, I would definitely recommend going out and grabbing it. If you don't have Reason 6.5, you can do most of what I'm about to do with the LFOs in Thor. It's just a little bit more complicated, but not too hard to figure out. Now, let's get programming this dual LFO. First, we're going to turn off LFO1's tempo sync and set the rate to about 2 Hz. Then we're going to turn on LFO2 and set the rate to about 0.3 Hz. Very slow. And what this is going to do is it's going to make LFO1's rate change. So we're going to route in the back of the pulsar from LFO2's output into LFO1's rate input. Now, as you can see, as LFO2 cycles, it's changing the rate of LFO1. Makes it a little bit more interesting than just a straight wobble. Now that we have that pulsar set up, we're going to drag the output of LFO1 into Thor's CV input 1. This means that in the modulation matrix, if we set a source to CV input 1, we can use it to control different aspects of the Thor. Now, we're going to set the destination, since we already have CV input 1 as the source, to our oscillator 2 position. The amount we're going to set to about 50 or 60, a little bit above 50, and take a listen to what this does to the sound. Oh, also make sure that the level on LFO1 is all the way to 100%, so that it really has an effect. So as you can hear, it has that sort of pulsing sound to it. So now that this pulsar and its routing is complete, we're going to create another one, except it's going to be very similar, so we're just going to duplicate this one. If you click on it and press Ctrl D, it duplicates it. And here we have the same routing as before. The only difference is we're going to lower LFO1's rate to a little over 1 Hz. That area. We're going to set LFO1's output on that second pulsar to CV input 2, and we're going to use this to control the panning of the instrument. So set source to CV input 2, and then the destination amp pan. We're going to set the amount to, again, about 50, and listen now. As you can hear, it's still panning, and it's still pulsating the position of the wavetable oscillator, but they're slightly unsynced, so it keeps the sound more interesting. Now, I said we'd have 3 pulsars, and so let's create the third one. And this one's going to have 2 independent oscillators. LFO2 is not going to be doing anything to LFO1. So, LFO1's output, we're going to move into CV input 3, and CV input 4, we're going to have LFO2's output. LFO1, we're going to turn on tempo sync and lower the rate to 12/4. This means that it's going to cycle every 3 bars. For LFO2, make sure it's on and change the rate to about 1.5 Hz. And we're going to put both of those into Thor. So again, in the modulation matrix, set the input to CV input 3, the amount to 65, and the destination filter 3 frequency. LFO4, or CV input 4, I should say, pulsar 3 is LFO2, complicated enough, is going to control the pitch, kind of make a little bit of a vibrato on the instrument. Now we're going to set CV input 4 as the source 3 times because we're going to do one for each oscillator. We're going to set the first destination to oscillator 1's pitch, second destination to oscillator 2's pitch, and the third destination to oscillator 3's pitch. The amounts we're going to have slightly different so that there's going to be a bit of a detuning effect that you'll hear. We're going to set the first one to 16, the second one we're going to have on 9, and the third one is going to be 13. Since they're all close but slightly different, it's just going to have almost a chorusy effect that's going to modulate with this frequency, with this LFO. Now that we have all that set up, let's take another listen. As you can hear, all these different LFOs are having the sound change quite a bit and in quite an interesting way. Okay, so next we're going to add an EQ. So right click the Thor, Studio FX, M-Class Equalizer. We're going to start with the low shelf, bring the frequency all the way down, the gain all the way down, and the Q all the way up. Now this gets rid of the very low end frequencies, but it also creates a bit of a bump a little over 150 Hertz. So we're going to remove that with param 1, lowering the frequency down to, again, a little bit over 150, and then the gain down 12 decibels or so. So set that up. And then the Q we're going to bring about 2.7, so it's a smooth curve there. Next we're going to notch out around 7.5 kilohertz. So let's bring the frequency up all the way very high. And then we're going to notch that out by about 12 decibels again. And we're going to increase the Q just a tad. Next we're going to add a reverb to the line mixer. So Studio FX RV7000. And we're going to dial in the effect in the mixer by about 2/3. So somewhere around 90. In the reverb, if we open it up, we're going to set the algorithm to plate mode. It's a nice plate reverb. And bring the decay way up about 3/4. And that's our reverb. Now let's take a listen. As you can see, that makes the panning effect a little bit less distracting, and it smoothens out the noise and it just adds a nice tail to it. Last, we're going to add an EQ. So on the mixer, Studio FX M-Class Equalizer, after the reverb. For this one, we're going to completely remove the lows, change the frequency to about 250 Hertz or so. The gain, again, all the way down, and the Q all the way up. It creates a nice warmth of the tone. Last, we're going to get rid of 1.1 kilohertz. So set the frequency to about 1.1 and decrease it by around 12 decibels again. Right, widen the Q a little bit. And just to make sure we don't get any clipping, Studio FX Maximizer, 4 millisecond look ahead, just a brick wall limit it. Let's listen to the final pad. Well, that's it. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and have a nice day.